December the 13th, 1981. A hurricane is brewing in the English Channel.
So in the middle of the channel we had a hell of a weather. 9-meter high waves at the beginning, at lunchtime. We were rolling like hell.
John Aisha was the chief engineer aboard the 8,000-ton Ecuadorian cargo ship Bonita. She was carrying fertilizer from Hamburg to Panama when she hit a hurricane just north of the Channel Islands.
But suddenly we had two big waves at the sides, and it felt for me like one big wave hit the flat bottom. So, and I said, hell, didn't we come up again?
Some 40 miles to the south, on the island of Guernsey, the St. Peter Port lifeboat volunteers were about to sit down to their Sunday lunches when they received a routine call. Among them was Peter Bougourd.
There was a naval ship in the harbour in danger of breaking adrift or perhaps being blown down on the lifeboat. So I said to Annie, well, this shouldn't take long.
But out in the channel, the Bonita's cargo had shifted, making her unstable. Rolling heavily and taking on water, she was being battered by 3-story waves and was starting to list.
When I came to the bridge, there was completely chaos. The captain and his wife and the child they were all sliding down to the starboard side of the bridge door, and they were laying down there. And I said, forget the ship, call for a Mayday.
At St. Peter Port, Coxswain Michael Scales responded to the Mayday call. He and his 7 crew members headed out into the hurricane. They would not be returning for lunch that day. John Webster was among the crew.
We immediately appreciated the weather that it was blowing. It was a low water, big spring tide, and it wasn't going to be very nice. And without Sunday lunch, we were going sort of mid-channel. But somebody was in trouble, so we launched.
Conditions were quite horrendous, really. The further we went, of course, it got, because we left the lee of the island. By the time we got to the casualty, it was 40, 45-foot swells, and it's still getting worse, actually.
While the lifeboat and 2 Navy helicopters were on their way, the Bonita's list increased to 45 degrees.
In the meantime, the first assistant engineer, he had slide on deck, and he hit the railing in such a speed that he crushed both his leg. And later on we found out he had 48 fractures in his leg. And 1 hour after we capsized, the first helicopter came out. So this was very, very dangerous. But after some tap, he had the captain's wife and little child, 2-year-old child, and 1 cook and 1 other guy. So 4 people was taken into a helicopter. And then we got a message that we will not be, they couldn't help us with the helicopter, but they told us that lifeboat was underway.
For the moment, the lifeboat, named the Sir William Arnold, was the only hope.
I was very pleased with myself, quite to be absolutely honest, because we were given a position where she was then. And I guesstimated her drift, and in actual fact we were only 10 minutes late, and I had to change course at the scene of the position I'd been given by 5 degrees, and we found her. If you know the lifeboat is coming, you're a much happier man than wondering what's going to happen next. And this is why I hated being late to casualties, because if you say you're going to get there at 4:10 and you still haven't got there at 4:15, they start to think, are they really coming?
Crew members Alan Martel, John Bougourd and Richard Hamon will always remember the scene that greeted them.
I think the
I think
boat...
we've all got memories.
Yeah.
I think one of the things was really approaching it, eh? Yeah. Sort of stuck out your mind apart from the weather, which was horrendous, but it was to see
a boat like that.
That photograph is just like a dead whale almost, Like dead whale, just laying and wallowing in the sea.
The actual boat rolling so violently, the wings of the bridge were in the sea.
Yeah. Well, we circled it just to take it all in, really.
It was hard to believe that a boat could roll like that without actually going over it. It's exposing its propeller and rudder, and then rolling back. It was quite something else.
Yeah.
The lifeboat crew realised that the safest way to get close to the survivors was to approach the ship's stern. The noise of the wind and spray rendered radio communications almost useless.
With the aid of a searchlight, we started to ask them to flick them with the searchlight and keep coming down the light. So some of them walked to the stern of the boat on the outside of the rails.
The electrician and me, we tried to help the second engineer with the crushed legs, so he could not walk. So we made ropes and we dragged him over deck. And I will mention that the ship at this time had more than 45 degrees, and it was still rolling, and we had to take him down ladders. I saw on hatch number 3 there was a motorman there. He was laying there with his broken bone, and bone was going up to his shoulder, and he was laying there. And the steward was standing there with white gloves. He failed, and the sea took him, and he went into the bulkhead and railing, and the next time I saw him, his head was away.
3 of the Bonita's crew prepared to jump onto the deck of the lifeboat, but one of them mistimed his jump and suffered a serious head injury when he landed. Coxswain Michael Scales decided on a new tactic. He would get close enough for his crew to throw a heaving line to the Bonita and pull the survivors aboard the lifeboat. At the front of the lifeboat were John Bougourd and Peter Bougourd, who threw the heaving line in the raging seas.
Take men of more words than me to do it proper justice, I think, but there's the shrieking of the wind in the rigging, there's the driving sleet and snow going along horizontally, the spray. Oh, I've got mental first snapshots in my mind which have never changed, never left me.
On the deck, preparing to pull people aboard, were Alan Martel, John Webster and Richard Hamon. On the exposed bridge was coxswain Michael Scales at the helm, and Peter Bisson, who operated the searchlight. Mechanic Bob Vowles was in the wheelhouse, in charge of communications and tending to the injured crew member.
Well, it was 2 women and 2 children were the first into the water, and the rest of the people still on the boat could see then that they were on the lifeboat very, very quickly. And they then all realised that that's the way they were going to have to go. If they were going to be rescued, they were going to have to jump in the water.
After working for hours in sub-zero temperatures, hurricane-force winds and massive waves, the volunteers managed to pull 16 people aboard the lifeboat. Coxswain Scales decided to give his crew a brief respite.
Then they were so exhausted, the crew on the lifeboat, that they just left us and they went up against the weather and they just were laying there. And then we thought that, okay, they cannot do anymore.
We backed off for 10 or 15 minutes. A couple of the crew who smoked had a smoke.
Well, for myself, it was a question of able to bring my trousers back up because they were down around my knees inside my oil skins. Most uncomfortable.
We sort of got the adrenaline back in our cells and we carried on.
On the Bonita, most of the survivors were shocked, cold and seasick, and 2 people had sustained serious leg injuries. One, the motorman, was stuck on the doors of a hatch, out of reach from his crewmates. The other was in the care of John Isher, but was too injured to jump. His only hope was the 2nd Navy helicopter, now on scene.
Talked to the helicopter pilot and said that the man who is sitting beside me has crushed both his legs and he cannot jump. So you have to give him the wire and the belt so you can have him up. But the wind was so strong that the wire was going completely watertight, absolutely horizontal. So I could touch the wheels of the helicopter. At the 3rd attempt, then we managed to have it around under his arm and he was away. I was so tired, and most of all, I just wanted to get away from this nightmare and just slide down on the flat bottom and just disappear. When it's 10 minutes to 8 in the evening, then it was my turn to jump. So the electrician and me, we jumped together and we hit the sea, and that was 2 degrees, but it felt very warm.
John and the electrician were pulled onto the lifeboat, and 2 more followed. That just left 1 person on the Bonita, the injured motorman, lashed to the ship's hatch.
The man was very much alive. We could see him. They tied him on one of the hatch covers. The Abeille Languedoc, which is one of the French rescue tugs, was alongside us, and we were told that they were going to have a go at coming aboard to rescue him. We had one very seriously injured man on board, and some others, apart from being cold, that they had been at sea. They were traumatised, so we had to look after the number that we had, and we left the other services to, hopefully rescue the other man on board.
I think it's the worst moment in my life that I had to leave him without doing anything. He was there with a flashlight. He was laying there on hatch number 3, and we couldn't do anything.
Well, I buckled to it with the charts, and I worked out that Brixham was only 27 miles away, whereas Guernsey was 60-something. So it was a no contest. It was Brixham for the night.
Assured that another lifeboat was on its way, Cox and Scales decided to head to Brixham after battling the sea for more than 7 hours. He, his crew and their lifeboat came in for great praise from those who had witnessed the rescue.
Consummate skill, absolutely wonderful boat handling. The Sir William was the best they ever built. That's of course, I think every lifeboat man says that. Ours is the best, but we know. Ours was the fastest. She sat the cleanest on the water at speed. We always thought anyway. But no doubt somebody else would argue differently with regard to their own boat. But we loved her.
But the boat, they were fantastic, how they maneuvered the boat. It was just unbelievable. 50 attack they did on the Bonita before we were all saved. They must have been so exhausted.
But the work of the lifeboat and her crew had not finished for the day. They faced a tough journey back to the Devon coast.
We were passing the bucket around at the various stages of mal de mer. And we had some down the after cabin, some down the forward cabin. And then the last few had to go in the wheelhouse. We were just getting full.
We'd been running, for 10 minutes, quarter of an hour, and we fell off a big wave. It was a big one, and that's when all the bunks in the forward compartment collapsed with everybody on them and what have you.
They were driving 100% and more than that, because the beds there were hanging 3 in height in chain, and they broke one after one, so we ended up on the floor, all of us. But after 15 minutes, the engineer opened the hatch down to us, and they said that the motorman Villacres was saved, but he was taken on board by a French tug. So, but after this 15 minutes, when he said that he was saved, then my tears was coming.
The Bonita's last survivor had been saved. At 10:45 p.m, the lifeboat finally reached land. The 29 survivors were all taken to hospital. Sadly, the man who had suffered a head injury did not survive.
My wife was of the opinion that I wasn't worth a brass farthing in the garden for a fortnight. The fatigue was that deep. And all the crew were very similar. I was the oldest. I was the daddy of the crew at the time, and I'm probably the worst affected. But even the youngsters said that they were absolutely shattered for days. And believe you me, anybody that says a footballer is tired after 90 minutes in a cup final doesn't know what tired is.
The lifeboat crew headed back to Guernsey the next day, when the volunteers finally arrived home 25 hours after receiving the Mayday call. The island's media were waiting for them.
When we saw the press as well, you start to read it, and you were part of it. You start to realise, yes, it was quite something.
Coxswain Michael Scales was one of those interviewed by the news later that day.
Well, it was a worrying time, but we're not worried for ourselves more than that. We're worried for the people that we're trying to rescue and trying to get them off in one piece, which we succeeded with most of them anyway. And we're quite happy to land them in Brixham.
Michael received the RNLI Gold Medal for Gallantry, the Lifeboatman's Victoria Cross, in recognition of his outstanding courage, initiative and seamanship. His crew were all awarded bronze medals for their role in the rescue. 6 days later, the volunteers at Penlee Lifeboat Station launched their lifeboat, the Solomon Browne. They headed to the aid of a coaster, the Union Star, that was being battered towards the Cornish coast by a hurricane. They never returned.
A week after we pulled off the Bonita, the Penlee boat was lost. Knocked the short of our Christmas.
When I came home, one of the first day after I come home, I saw on television this terrible accident on Penlee. I really got something to think of. But I was so glad that we so many of us survived, because they were so dramatic. Without these fantastic, brave and skilled men, we have been all gone and lost. That's for sure. These men, they gave me at least 30 more years to live.